I'm all about helping other people because I don't want anyone to go through this, ever.
Your third failure is your second marriage and
Yeah.
being in this abusive, coercive relationship.
Yeah.
So you've spoken a bit about how you got into it and what happened. And it was off the back of this very intense love affair with Eddie Murphy, and then feeling a bit like he'd said something that he didn't mean in the heat of the moment. And it was almost like you wanted to prove that you were lovable. Is that right?
Yeah. Not just that. I wanted to... He'd said something wrong. I wanted him to make sure he was going to say it right, because I don't believe that you can just like fluff over that. If you've publicly embarrassed me and you're sorry, well, then you have to now go rectify it.
So he had been caught on the hop by a reporter, a TV reporter. You had, sorry,
'Cause I'd left him.
I sound like such a stalker, but it's just because I love your book so much that I know every detail. So basically, you had flown to Leeds because you are very independent, and Eddie wanted you to move in together, and you were like, actually, I just need some time to think. And he thought you'd abandoned him, you'd left him.
Yeah.
And in that time, even though you hadn't, you flew back a few days later.
Yeah, and he called my mum, of all people.
And in that time, a TV reporter said, oh, Melanie's pregnant. And he said something like, well, she'll have to prove paternity.
Yeah.
Which he didn't mean because he knew that he was the dad.
Well, I always say, well, if you didn't mean it, then you're going to have to mean it in another way, in a nicer way, which I then made him get a DNA test, which he said he didn't want to do because he knows it was mine and ours, it's something other. So I said, well, you're going to have to, because I'm already pregnant and I'm going through supermarket shopping and people are looking at me sideways. I said, I didn't bring this on, you did. Because we had a very private relationship and it was beautiful. But then that happened and then it turned it sour for a little bit. But then it kind of made itself up, but I wasn't going to go back to that.
So into that mix arrives this person.
Well, I think that this person had hunted me down. Like I always say, you don't wake up and say, oh, I really want to find an abuser as my boyfriend. They find you, and they're very smart, and they find you at the right time, and they say the right things, and they do the right things, and you are swept off your feet, and before you know it, you're married, and you haven't spoken to your mum in a while, and you don't know where your credit card is, and but you're at work because you're the only person that's earning the money.
That process that you describe was very gradual, wasn't it?
Yeah, they don't like outwardly abuse you, obviously, in the first couple of days, months, weeks. But what they do is they emotionally mould you. So it'll be like, oh, your friend's got a nice dress on. I love that colour. I bet that colour will look really good on you. So then he buys you a dress in that colour. You think, oh, that's really nice. And then another dress, and then another suggestion. Why don't you wear that? And then a little bit down the line, it's like, oh, I've put your clothes out for you to wear. And you think, oh, that's kind. Actually, they're really just completely controlling you. And then you're in this thing of, oh, well, I know he likes that, but you know it doesn't feel right. Like if somebody genuinely was saying, this looks great on you, wow, but it's always done with an abuse tone. That's how you know it's abuse, because he's already pointed out some other girl, so now you feel insecure. And if you didn't before, you do over time. So then it starts trapping you on every single level, and it's not overnight. It's really gradual and really subtle. And that's why when Louise, who wrote the book with me, she put the 15 signs of abuse in the back of my book. And before I even knew what that was, she went, have a read of that. And by this point, I was like, I don't want to talk about abuse anymore, because it's so draining. And I didn't know how abused I had been, for a start. So I look at these 15 signs and I go, well, yeah, that's the timeline of my marriage, obviously. And she was like, no, this is the signs from Women's Aid that you know if you're being abused. And I was like, I tick every single one of them, and I've asked you to come out and write this book. I knew it was going to be a little bit dark, and I didn't know it was going to be that honest, and that, because I didn't know how much I'd been abused. And Louise actually ended up doing a bunch of research on domestic violence, doing a bunch of research on abuse. She then had to go and interview 15 of my friends, work friends, whether it be from Simon Cowell's assistant or accountant, to actually piece my life back together. And then Louise would say to me, so and so said this about you because they saw that. I'd go, no, they didn't. And then I'd go, yeah, that happened, and actually it happened like that, but there was a bit more of even worseness on top of it. So by the time the book started to really form a shape, I was like, I have been really badly abused on every single level. And if that can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. It can happen to my kids. we need to do something about this. And she was like, yeah, that's why you told me to write the book. And then it was like, well, I don't know if I want that book to come out.
Yeah.
And then Phoenix had wrote her chapter, and I didn't realise what she had seen, being in the same house, what she'd heard and what she'd seen. I was in shock. And then my hairdresser at the time wrote his own chapter, which is still my hairdresser in America. And I was like, this is all a real story. And the good thing about this book is because Louise actually approached it like a courtroom. So if I did want to go to court for domestic violence or whatever it was, I had 15 solid witnesses that were all professional in their fields that saw what they saw. And then that reminded me of what had actually happened to me. So it was quite incredible, really. And then I didn't want it to be published because I thought, well, my career's going to end.
Yeah.
And I don't know anybody that's been that honest. I know Tina Turner's story from that movie, What's Love Got to Do with It? This is back in 2017, 18, and my dad had just died. I'm like, well, my dad would be horrified, but he gave me the strength to leave him. Do I really want to put it all out there like that? And between Louise and my daughter, they were like, well, you've got to, because you could be helping other people. I was like, well, that is going to give me the strength, because I'm all about helping other people, because I don't want anyone to go through this, ever.
I mean, you are the embodiment of girl power in that respect, because power isn't about not being vulnerable. Power is about having the bravery to share your vulnerability, knowing that that truth will reach someone in a desperate situation and make them feel stronger.
Yeah.
That's power.
Yeah.
And that's what you've done. And I'm so grateful and proud of you for doing it.
Thank you. Well, I think if I would have had a book like that sitting on my table during that 10-year marriage, I would have took that book and ran for the fucking hills, because at least somebody is describing what I'm going through.
When you say that you didn't recognise some of it at first, or that you'd blocked it out,
Yeah.
is that a kind of mental trapdoor of protection, or was there something else going on there as well that made it difficult
I
to
think
connect
it's a lot
to?
of things. I think you disassociate it, but I didn't want to really admit that, because if I really admit that, then who am I? What have I done? It's my fault. And
it's
no
not.
one's going to believe me, but that's the
Okay.
mindset that you have. My fault, and no one's going to believe me. So I don't really want to admit that, because I can't really admit that to myself, because that's shocking. But when so many other people around you have seen stuff and they're shouting about it, finally, because they know that I've divorced that monster, then I can't deny that, because I don't want anybody else to feel like that.
Thanks for tuning in. And if you found this video enjoyable, be sure to check out the full episode on your preferred podcast platform. And make sure you're following How to Fail on social media for additional content and updates.